All right, I got 5 easy steps to starting a podcast. 5 easy steps starting a great podcast that people actually download and people will listen to. Step number 1, don't worry about fancy equipment. Now, this gets people hung up immediately when they try to start a podcast. They're out there, and there's so many things out there that say, use this microphone, use this mixer, use this equipment. Well, here's the secret to that. Most of those people are just hawking equipment. They're recommending the equipment that gives them the best commission. That's why they're making you buy $1,000 microphones and $2,000 mixers. That's why they're making you download crazy expensive software that costs you a monthly fee. You don't need a ton of fancy equipment to start a podcast. You know, when I started my podcast, I had $200 Walmart computers. Now, a faster computer that's more expensive will help you go faster in the editing process, in the creation process. But you don't have to go out and have a MacBook Pro. And I use a MacBook Pro now that I can afford to buy one. Back then, I couldn't do it. And if I was just starting out, I would never tell anyone to go do that. You can go out and buy a reasonable computer and you can record yourself on your podcast. Listen, we use Zoom to record our podcast. I am recording right now on Zoom. I just started a meeting and I'm the only one in the meeting. And I buy the cloud storage on Zoom. So after I hit record here, it's going to go to the cloud and it's going to be there for my team to edit. And if I was on my own, I could edit it myself. There's even an option on Zoom where you can save it on your hard drive. And almost every software we see, like Google Meeting or anything that you can broadcast online, records you. Heck, you could probably stream straight to YouTube and just download the file and strip the audio off of it. Don't overcomplicate this stuff. All you need is a reasonable computer, something like Zoom or some way to record yourself speaking. And there's free programs out there like Audacity that will let you edit the podcast. Heck, last night I was recording a video on this software called Loom. It's a great software. It goes into your browser. You can click a button and you can record your screen. And I recorded a video that a buddy of mine needed, and I went in and edited it right there in Loom online. So there's tons of solutions out there to edit your podcast, and you really don't need a powerful computer to do it. If I lost my computer today, I could go to Walmart and buy a $200 to $500 computer, and I promise you there'd be a podcast next week. So don't let the gurus tell you got to have some fancy computer to do this right. You also don't need a fancy microphone. Y'all, listen, this microphone right here, I don't even know what it costs. Hold on, let me look it up here. I'm going to type it in. I'm literally, can you hear my keyboard? Amazon. I'm going to go to Amazon, and I'm going to type in this microphone that I'm using. And you're listening to me, so I must sound pretty good, right? All right, the microphone that I'm using right now is called the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X USB Cardioid Dynamic USB XLR microphone with foam windscreen as a bonus. You can get this microphone right now on Amazon.com, and it's only around $76 to $99. So less than $100 will get you the same microphone that I've used to record almost, gosh, I don't even know how many. This one right here, this is the new one. I had the original ATR 2100. This is the 2100X. The only thing I can see that's different is this one's black and that one was silver. But I have recorded 99% of my podcasts over my entire career with this microphone. So it's like $100. If you have a computer, you can get on Amazon right now, get $100. This thing will plug right into your computer with the USB microphone and out, or with a USB cord, and out of the gate, out of the box, it's going to sound amazing. Step number 2, don't worry about fancy guests. People come up to me all the time. They're like, I want to start a podcast, but I just can't talk to famous people like you, Shane, and I just can't meet the people you do, and I just don't know anybody who would be on my show, and blah, 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 blah. Listen, you're not going to have fancy guests in the beginning if you got a guest podcast. That's okay. I didn't either. Yes, you may hear me interview now people, famous entrepreneurs like Amy Porterfield or Dean Graziosi. You may hear me talk to influencers like Priscilla Shire, people with over 1 million followers on social media. But y'all, my first podcast that I ever recorded was a podcast about coaching football. I couldn't get any college coaches or any NFL coaches or any famous people to talk to me. So I got an old buddy from high school who is the local 7th grade middle school defensive coordinator. I could not even get the 7th grade head coach to talk to me on my podcast. I had to go get the 7th grade defensive coordinator, the second in command. And we just talked. We talked about defense. Man, he loves defense. We talked about the 6'2" defense. I'll never forget it. It's my first podcast. I said it before. Joe Rogan, the biggest podcaster on the planet, love him or hate him. He's got the most downloads. But he started out, he was like, I'm just going to record me and my friends talking because it's hilarious. And he sat around and talked to his friends, and they just talked. And they just recorded, they just released it out there. He didn't have a grand plan on talking, to Elon Musk and presidents and, Edward Snowden's and all these people. He just started talking and said, I wonder who else would talk to me. And he started asking to see who would talk to him. All right. Tip number 3 for growing a podcast as an anchor piece of content in your business or your mission or your nonprofit, whatever it is for the first year, I want you to totally ignore the data. I don't even want you to log in. Look at it once a quarter. That's the only difference in a business owner and a CEO. Quarterly reports. A business owner is obsessing over it every single day, looking at everything, getting depressed because they only got 10 downloads. A CEO says, all right, we're going to do what it takes to win every day, every week, all month. That's going to stack up month after month after month. And I'm going to check this about every quarter. See, the CEO is focused on the doing. The wannabe entrepreneur, podcaster, business owner is focused on the data. You can focus on the data later. You can hire people to focus on the data, but you don't need to focus on the data in the beginning. This is counterintuitive. I know. But there's just nothing good from sitting there and staring at your statistics. I'm telling you, I barely look at it now. And I got a company that's doing millions in sales this year. Data informs decisions, but decisions still have to be made. And you ain't got a lot of data in the beginning, people. There's not going to be a ton of people listening. But if you don't launch a podcast, there'll be 0 people listening. So we got to get your podcast out there. Just be consistent in the first year. Commit to releasing your podcast at least once a week. Be consistent. Commit to being prolific. Be prolific with your podcast. You should set up social media accounts for your podcast on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram. What am I leaving out? Oh, and you need to do something on TikTok because TikTok's everywhere. And then you need to set up a YouTube account where you can upload your podcast to YouTube. And you need to be prolific. You need to share in those places every single week. So you record a podcast consistently. You release a podcast on the same day every week. Whoever does find you, make sure they know you're going to be there for them consistently. You prolifically share it every single week. And then you relentlessly work at getting the podcast to be better, to find good guests, to write good solo shows, to write great show notes for your podcast. Work on making the content the best it will be. If you'll ignore the data and you'll just let it happen, and you'll just be consistent, prolific, and relentless with your recording, with your sharing, and with your production, at the end of the first 3 months, you're going to have a much better product, and you are going to have people that are listening to your show. You just are. Little side note here too. Always have a free gift on every podcast. Like if you can go out from the beginning and you can make a little PDF guide of something you know or something you teach or something you love, or you can record a little video that maybe teaches something, anything you can give away for free, and you can pitch a URL in your podcast, that podcast audience that will come, if you release it out there, somebody's going to find that thing in search and somebody's going to listen to it. Somebody's going to see it on social media and share it. But if you have an opt-in, a lead magnet, something you can pitch, you're going to start growing an email list, which is going to eventually be something you can use to make money. All right, step number 4, sell your something, not somebody else's something. A lot of people look at podcasting like the old school ad game, man. You got a show on TV or a radio station, you throw some ads on it. And I hear podcasters all the time go, I'm looking for ads. I got 100 downloads. Will somebody give me $25 to be a sponsor or whatever? Or I got 1,000 downloads. Will somebody give me $50? It's like ridiculous. The ad game is a rabbit hole that you don't want to go down. Joe Rogan reads ads on his podcast because he has 100 million people listening to him. I think it's 11 million an episode. But I don't recommend you go down that road. I recommend you sell something of your own. This could be courses. It could be memberships. It could be something you teach online. It could be coaching. Are you a one-on-one coach? Are you a life coach? You could coach somebody in something. And use that valuable real estate on your podcast for ads to your product. You hear me pitch it right here. This podcast is sponsored by the Flipped Lifestyle community, where we start, build, and grow online businesses together. And I pitch it every week, flippedlifestyle.com/free. I'm pitching my thing. Over on Flipped Lifestyle, we pitch the same thing. The reason why is my thing is more lucrative. If I sell 1,000 people something for $50 a month, I'm making $50,000 a month for my podcast. Ain't nobody going to give me $50,000 to run an ad on any of my shows. I've got a great audience. I've got a pretty big audience, but it's not 1 million people a month. If I go out there and try to sell ads, nobody's going to give me any money for it. But I can sell 100 of my thing for $100, and that's $10,000. So I highly recommend you pitch something that is your own, that you create, a course, a coaching, a training. Maybe you've got supplements and e-commerce that you sell. Sell your stuff on your podcast. See, money makes the mission possible. Money supports the mission. Your podcast is your mission. All right, finally, craft stories. Craft stories. Pepper everything you do with stories. Look at all the stories I've told you today. I told you how the story of how I recorded my first podcast with terrible equipment. I told you how the story of how my first podcast guest was a 7th grade coach, and it led to this guy on ESPN, right? Not only is the overall podcast telling a story, I'm telling you the story of how to start a podcast, but I've got other little stories peppered in. These stories can come from your background, they can come from things you create, or they can come from the conversations that you have with your guests. People are here. People are listening. for the story. The ultimate goal of our podcast is to gain influence, is to gain income, is to make an impact out in the world, right? We don't want to go into podcasting as just an arrogant, I want people to hear what I have to say. That's part of it. I mean, you want people to hear what you have to say. Everybody's got something to say. But it's also helping people get results. And if you follow these 5 steps, if you don't worry about fancy equipment, you just get what I tell you. If you don't worry about fancy guests, you ain't got to have fancy guests in the beginning. Just talk to yourself or talk to somebody else. Doesn't matter who comes on your show. If you ignore the data and you just focus on being consistent, prolific, and relentless for the first quarter, first year, when you monetize, don't go chasing ad dollars. Make mad dollars by selling your own thing, people. The influence will come. The income will come. And if your podcast teaches and entertains and informs and inspires through amazing storytelling, you will have everything you need to make a big impact with your podcast.